Hello, my friend. Welcome to the study, where today we're going to look into the life of a little-known and unlikely scholar and traveler. Talk about his views of the English countryside at the turn of the 19th and 20th century. In this late summer, as well as have a little bit of history and legend, and read some of his poetry. So we're talking about Alfred Williams. Alfred Williams was known as the Hammerman poet. He was born at South Marston near Swindon. This is in the south of England, roughly halfway between London and Bristol, along a prehistoric route called the Prehistoric Ridgeway. This chalk feature is a large ridge that runs roughly east-west across southern England from about the Avebury Stone Circle, which is roughly south of Bath, to this hilly area roughly north of Reading, called the Chilterns. And all along this stretch of bucolic, quiet countryside, which is now an area of outstanding natural beauty or a protected natural area, we have lots of Iron Age and Stone Age monuments. This was a route used by prehistoric peoples and was a route to the Wash in Norfolk on the North Sea. It can be seen from miles around the countryside, and along it are stone circles, burial mounds, hill forts, and other barrows. This part of the country where Alfred Williams grew up was particularly quiet. It's called the Vale of White Horse. Little or few people know nowadays that this area, its center formed in Oxford, just north, formed the hub of the English medieval crown. The monarch Henry II and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine had their palace in Oxford, and there they were surrounded by the country's administration, as well as a very large abbey here on the river Isis that meets the Tame River in Dorchester, then becoming the Thames that we know today. This giant abbey at Abingdon, St. Mary's, was completely destroyed by Henry VIII during the dissolution, but whilst it existed, it controlled most of the land surrounding the Vale of White Horse, Oxfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Berkshire, even all the way up to Warwickshire. It had control over river crossings, farms, orchards, and smaller religious houses. But it was not the only religious house, though it was a very strong one, and it served the community in the way of education and, of course, jobs, but was also very powerful, hence Henry VIII's decision to destroy it. This map is from the 19th century, when Alfred Williams would have been traveling through this area on his bicycle. He had a love for the countryside in which he grew up, and the people in it, and wrote about the people, the language, the dialects, the poetry, the stories, and the songs that he encountered. He was very curious and very intelligent, and wrote down everything he saw. So this area, in the Middle Ages, having been a busy hub of activity, agricultural as well as administrative, after the dissolution became a very quiet, pastoral part of the countryside. The Vale of White Horse has a hill with a chalk horse on it. This was drawn by prehistoric people. No one really knows why, but we assume it's a horse, even though the head looks really odd. White horses have traditionally been a sacred animal to the native Britons and Celtic peoples. So, though Alfred was born near Swindon, a larger city to the west of the White Horse, he was right on the edge of the countryside and industry. You can see the Great Western Railway runs both east-west and north-south, and Swindon is there, next to the Wilts and Berks Canal, which connects the Thames. The Thames Canal, which flows east to the North Sea, to the Avon, which flows out into the Severn through Bristol. So we have industry meeting the countryside. And in this map you can see Alfred's surroundings. Here we have Berkshire meeting Wiltshire and the Vale of White Horse. Today, the county lines have changed, putting the Vale of White Horse in Oxfordshire, as well as this surrounding countryside, where south of the Ridgeway is left to Berkshire, the royal county, where Windsor Castle and Henley and Ascot are located. Let's look at this 19th century map of the Vale of White Horse. You can see White Horse Hill and the Dragon Hill along the Ridgeway here. And there's also another road running parallel called Icknield Way. And these run the length of this ridge. And to the north, where we have Childry, Challow, Kingston, Lisle, and Kingston Bagpies. There's Uffington and Kingston Warren. All of these names with king in them refer to Alfred the Great, the Saxon king credited with unifying southern England and pushing out the Danes in a decisive battle on a hill that is rumored to be this hill next to Blueberry, where the Ridgeway meets the Chilterns, or Blueburton Hill, and the battle was Ashdown, although no one knows where this battle actually took place. That is one of the local legends. There are Saxon remains as well, including a tithe barn, an old Saxon tithe barn in Farringdon Parish. And this was also an area peppered with Roman villas, large residential, agricultural villas, some of which are still being discovered today with their gorgeous mosaic floors and bits of fresco from the walls. It is also rumored, or shall we say local legend has it, that the legendary Battle of Baden Hill, fought by the legendary King Arthur, was here at Uffington Castle, near the White Horse. So there are lots of legends here, and it is a land and a countryside steeped in a history that, up until the last few years, was a very sleepy, peaceful part of southern England. Born in 1877, Alfred was the fifth of 8 children. His father was a carpenter, and his mother the daughter of a farmer. Under these circumstances, in the 19th century, Alfred grew up in poverty. His father left the family, and his mother was left to raise the children alone. In order to make ends meet, she sold sweets and delivered newspapers. Like any young boy, Alfred had a fascination for trains and machinery. Once, when he was 10 years old, it is said he lay between the railway tracks to let a long train pass above him, just on a dare. Alfred's education was poor, despite his mother's efforts. When he was only 8 years old, he began part-time work on a farm and only went to school for half a day. When he was 11 and had finished primary school, he became a full-time farm laborer. Although this was perfect for his love of the countryside, as with many young men at that time, the prospect of better pay at the Great Western Railway factory in Swindon won him over at the age of 15. 2 of his brothers were already employed with the GWR. They would walk into town 4 miles every day and home again at the end of the day. By 1892, the Swindon Train Works had become a thriving community, and Alfred worked first as a rivet hotter, then as a furnace boy in the stamping shop, before becoming a drop stamper in 1893. So it was very hard and dirty work. It was here, in the hot and physically demanding stamping shop, that Alfred was to spend all of his 23 years in his employment with the GWR. Despite his work with machines, though, Alfred's heart was always in the countryside, surrounding his place in Swindon, the Vale of the White Horse. He spent every spare hour learning the ways of the countryside, painting its landscapes, and observing its people. Determined to educate himself, in 1897 Alfred would read during his dinner hour, to the amusement of his colleagues at the factory. In 1900, he embarked on a 4-year English literature course with Ruskin Hall in Oxford, just down the street from the site of Henry's Beaumont Palace, where Richard Lionheart and King John were born. And he even learned Latin in order to aid his studies. At the age of 26, he married his childhood sweetheart, Mary Peck, a moulder's daughter, and they were devoted to each other throughout their lives. Alfred would rise at 4 a.m. each morning to teach himself Greek and French before walking the 4 miles to work. Alfred found a remarkable ability to master languages. He was so taken with language studies that he would chalk words on his furnace at the factory. By 1907, he was writing his own verse, and 2 years later, he published Songs in Wiltshire, a collection of love songs and nature poems. The long years at the factory and his strict routine took a toll on his health, though. But through it, he published Poems of Wiltshire in 1911, thanks to his wife Mary's devoted support. By then, he had become well known in Swindon. He gave lectures at the Mechanics' Institute and had also been a guest at the Poets' Dinner in London. It was there that a reporter suggested he write an account of his life as a hammerman. So he began this work in the summer of 1911. Written in a matter of 12 weeks, nights after work, Life in a Railway Factory was to become his greatest work and legacy. Alfred would not be able, however, to publish the book while he was still employed with the Great Western Railway because of the portrayal in it of the life endured by the workers. Despite that, Alfred still continued to write both poems and prose, publishing A Wiltshire Village and Villages of the White Horse. Though he had become highly regarded as a writer locally and abroad, he still lived in poverty and had spent his life savings on publishing his books. Fortunately, his new books sold well, and he was able to publish a new book of poems, Cor Cordium, in 1912. His health, however, continued to fail, and in February 1914 he was forced to stay in bed for over a week after suffering chest pain. His system had almost been destroyed by all the harsh working conditions at the railway, and by September he was forced to leave the railway works, chalking a single word in Latin above his furnace: Vici, I have conquered. At last, Life in a Railway Factory could be published, and it was immediately acclaimed by the critics. The Daily Chronicle called it a book of revelation, and the Times produced a lengthy review that began, "This book may be read either as pure literature or as a social study. It is both." They called him a born observer with a gift of words and a love of the truth. Though the book was well received, it did not sell well. Meanwhile, the First World War had taken center stage, and despite his ill health, Alfred volunteered for service. He served as a gunner in the Royal Field Artillery, sent to India. He was fascinated by the country and at one stage moved to Raniket, within sight of Mount Everest, his experiences rekindling his desire for writing. He returned to South Marston in 1919, to a life of poverty, with only a grant from the Royal Literary Fund to help him through the difficult times. Alfred was almost forgotten as a writer after the First World War. Nevertheless, still full of passion for writing in languages, he continued to cycle around the countryside, collecting stories and material, writing and publishing round about the Upper Thames and folk songs of the Upper Thames. He also taught himself Sanskrit. using old bricks that they salvaged from a disused canal, possibly Wilson Park's Canal. Alfred and Mary built themselves a home which they called Raniket, and were settled into it by 1921. However, by 1930, Mary's health also began to decline. When Alfred discovered she had cancer, it was too much for him and he died in April that year. Mary died a few weeks later. It was after his death that Tales from the Panchatantra and Tales from the East were published. Alfred traveled around this countryside on his bicycle, collecting local history, lore, and local songs. Without his scholarship, research, and records, much of it would have been lost today. And here we have the stories of these little villages all around the Vale of White Horse. The Carter of Woolstone, sketch of the Downs, and that's the undulating hills south of the Ridgeway called the Downs. Barbary Castle, the gardener's cottage, bees and badgers, the wrong pig, ancient charges, the sporting farmer, barley bangers. All of these lovely titles make you want to read every quirky story. The Church and Clock, Sawyer John, the Lost Wagoner, the Ox Carter, the Old Gamekeeper and his Cottage, Elm Tree Inn, Pebble Soup, the Flint Diggers, Hudson's Pudding, Boning, Earl's Court Farm, and even Danish traditions. This one has ghosts in it as well. The Combe, an old word for a little valley. Stream and water meadow, flight of plovers, dabchicks, hawking thyme bushes, watercress beds, the stream and water meadow, features of the Downs, Ashdown House and Wood, the Upper Mill, and here we've got wheel and machinery and grinding operations. And what we're going to look at, chalk pits, Wayland Smith's Cave, which you might remember the Long Barrow, and White Horse Hill, Storms of the Vale, the Old Revels, Uffington Village, Tom Brown's School, the Blowing Stone. And yes, that is the Tom Brown of the famous story, Tom Brown's School Days. Horse Hill, close beside the Ridgeway. In a large oval enclosure surrounded with beech trees is the far-famed Wayland Smith's Cave, or Wayland's Smithy, with which is associated a time-honored legend, firmly believed in by the villagers at the present time. The story goes that an invisible smith named Wayland or Wayland dwelt in the cave and had his forge hidden far under the earth out of sight of all that passed that way. When any traveller wanted his horse shod or arms repaired, he brought them and left them at the entrance to the cave, depositing the money for the fee at the same time, and then retired afar off. A short while he came back and found the work done and the money removed, but no one could catch sight of old Wayland. If one brought his horse and waited outside, though he stayed all day and night, no one came to see what his need might be, and he dared not venture inside the cave for deadly fear. But as soon as he departed from the entrance, the horse disappeared, and was soon restored again, newly shod. The great mystery was, there was no noise and no smoke. Whatever assistance the smith had were invisible too. One day old Wayland lost his temper, and gave a thrilling proof of his mighty strength, striking fear into the folks of the countryside round about. Running short of nails, he sent his favourite imp, Flibbertigibbet, down into the valley to obtain some from the other blacksmiths, and bade him make haste about it, as a horse was standing outside to be shod. After waiting several hours, he looked out from the cave and saw the imp had yielded to the temptations of a mortal, and gone birds nesting in the fields, forgetful of the nails. Thereupon Wayland, falling into a passion, snatched up a big round stone, used an anvil, and threw it at the loiterer 2 miles off. The stone shot through the air with a loud, whizzing noise, and, falling short of the mark, nevertheless slid along the ground, and struck the imp on the foot, retaining the mark of his heel on one side. Thereupon the imp appeared to the astonished rustics, limping and snivelling, and rubbing his eyes with his fist, so they called the spot Snivelling Corner, and the name remains to this day. From Uffington. There's Uffington and the Ridgeway. From Uffington, the glaring road leading up to the famous White Horse passes between level fields for a mile to the base of the hill, with the mighty Chalk Down lying like huge Tychon, the giant whose body covered 11 acres in Tartarus, straight in front, showing greater and grander the nearer you approach it. A short way up the slope, a narrow road crosses, leading along to the Blowing Stone at Kingston Lisle. There is Uffington, Iron Age Hillfort, or Uffington Castle, the White Horse, the Blowing Stone, Uffington, and Kingston Lisle, and the road that curves, and the road on the Ridgeway between the fields. And you can see that even in the 19th century there's a horse race course near Lambourn, where they still train racehorses today for the race at Ascot. But let's return to Uffington. A short way up the slope from the valley continues straight up, winding round the horse's manger, and emerges on top, passing beneath the walls of Castellum. Just there. There we are, beneath the castle. Afterwards, degenerating into a rough track full of deep ruts, used only by farm carts and wagons. On the left-hand side of the road is a deep combe, and beyond that a large wood of ash and hazel. Suspended beneath the hill and teeming with primrose, violet, anemone, hyacinth, and bellflowers in the season. Adown the slope of the hill, at the combe's head, long and whitish marks are visible some distance off. These are shining tracks where the young people and holiday-makers slide down from top to bottom on the long, slippery grass. Once it is traversed over, it is as sleek as ice. A great speed is attained soon after the start, and continued right down into the hollow. On the opposite side of the road is the mysterious Dragon Hill. The White Horse Hill is very steep, and there's a little round Dragon Hill opposite. The Dragon Hill was also, in the mid part of the 20th century, a pigeon drop for Cold War spies. The old White Horse sprawls his huge length on the slope high above, though its shape is undistinguishable till you are removed a mile or more off in a northwesterly direction. It can be seen on the satellite maps as well. If you look for Uffington and go south, you'll be able to zoom in and see that white chalk horse facing this way on the slope of the hill. The view from the top of the down above the horse's head is truly magnificent. It is claimed that 11 counties are visible from the hill, but that is probably an exaggeration. Though the eye can penetrate 40 or 50 miles until it is baffled by the faint blue haze along the horizon, where the far end of the exquisite downline fades and melts insensibly into the soft azure sky. The spacious vale, the garden of the Lord, as Tom Hughes called it, is extended below in all its beauty and loveliness, dotted with numerous villages and dark blue woods, stretching away to the Thames and Cotswolds on the one hand, and over towards the city of Oxford on the other. Back from the valley lie the downs, green or golden, yellowish white or light brown, now enclosing a level plain in an amphitheatre, with a few plantations and farms, now rising into ridges and lines, running and leaping, twisting and curving, and winding like living things, the whole strangely and deeply impressive, silent, lonely, and solitary, yet acting powerfully on the mind and soul, and awaking immortal feelings and desires which are mollified and diminished when you turn round and contemplate the milder and more human scenery of the valley. And here we can see Alfred's relationship between the pastoral countryside and his own personal history of having to work with the Great Western Railway. The wind during an ordinary storm or gale rages over the hilltop with terrific fury, dashing fiercely against the steep western walls of the castellum, and roaring with the noise and din of 10,000 cataracts, whirling you back from the parapet as though you were no more than a dry leaf, and chilling you through and through with intense cold and numbness. It would have been comparatively easy matter to storm the camp under such conditions. The mighty gale behind lifts you up the steep slope with the lightness of a cork, and dashes you headlong down from the naked walls above. During stormy weather, you may stand on the hill and watch the isolated showers in their birth, progress, decline, and death all over the valley. These first of all show in thin white pillar-like mist, growing rapidly into the density of a large cloud, trailing a mile long or more, as the moisture is spent in the phantom-like shape, gradually dissolves, and presently vanishes from view, and another appears and takes its place in mid-air. We can see lots of interesting local legends about a fox's head, a brass polisher, and an old clock. Alfred Williams seems to have been very astute as he viewed the countryside and its people. Let's listen to a poem by Alfred Williams. The Valley of the White Horse. Some sing of costly treasure ships, the hoarded gold of grain, the azure vaults of Italy, the spicy shores of Spain, of cinnamon and citron, purple mountains of the vine, but none can tell a sweeter song than this dear vale of mine. The rolling Danube and the Rhine are pleasant themes to me, the golden Tiber and the Nile disgorging to the sea. The Tagus and the Amazon may stretch a wider course, but loveliest of all valleys is the Valley of White Horse. From where the rising Cotswolds rear their gentle sloping crowns, to where the high-hearted Liddington o'ertops the rolling downs. Oh, give me leave to wander still, I hold the world to scorn, in the valley of my childhood, in the land where I was born. There's Farringdon and Folly Hill, and Stanford in the Vale, and Uffington and Inglesham, and Highworth and Hale, and many a pleasant seated grove and ancient old retreat, the humble dwelling of the poor, the palace of the great. True, no tremendous torrent roars through hollow cleft ravine, or cloudy mountain pillar overtops the rising scene. But there are terraces and slopes, and woody walls and bowers, and gentle winding rivulets through purple banks of flowers. Here burn the scented clover tops, and there the lily blows, the crimson-hearted sorrel, and the heavy breathing rose. As far as eye can penetrate, as long as sight can reach, behold the glory of the elm, the acorn, and the beech. Here, sitting on the high hillside, I feel the breezes blow, a wave of summer incense from the jeweled depths below, and sweeter than the cooling breath that's winnowed from the sea, the gentle breathing of the vale comes floating up to me. I see the morning sun rise, and watch the star go down, and through my soul's sorrow, now it hopes to hold the crown. I crave no other recompense, no other honor hail, but first to walk upon the hill, and slumber in the vale. There's something whispers in mine ear, I would not reason why. As long as woods and valleys live, thou hast no need to die. And now I recognize the voice, and tell the accent clear, the vocal spirit of the vale, the mover of the sphere. Long may I walk beside the stream and woo the solemn burn. Here weave the pliant willow, and there pluck the folded fern, while slender-footed Isis draws his silver fountained force, and winds his growing torrent down the Valley of White Horse. My friend, thank you for spending this time with me in the study, looking at the southern English countryside, and a remarkable man who enjoyed it, saw wonders in it, and sought to share those with the rest of the world across time and space. I hope you've enjoyed this sojourn with me. Be good to yourself. Be kind to others.